Sure. So my name is Virginia Acha. I lead the Research, Medical, and Innovation Policy at the Association for the British Pharmaceutical Industry. We're the trade body that represents the research-based pharmaceutical companies here in the UK. Before joining the ABPI a couple of years ago, I worked for Amgen in international regulatory policy, and before that I was 5 years at Pfizer, and before that I was an academic. So it's been a long, it's given me a lot of perspectives on how to bring industry and academia together. They're central. So I think 50 years of the research here at Earlwood, I think, is a beautiful example of why we do have such a heritage in life sciences research. These companies that have come, like Lilly, to establish their research bases here have not only benefited from the excellent science we have in the UK, they've actually, they've made it, they've contributed part of it, they are part of the ecosystem that we have. And it's made us as a country unique in that, as a relatively small country, we still have what people will always say, science that punches well above its weight. And I think you can't discount the importance of having a real concentration of scientific community based here in Earlwood as a way to generate not only new insights into neuroscience, but in a whole range of life science areas. It's interesting to me, particularly having grown up in the States, when I come to the UK, the vibrancy of the research community here is just staggering. You have, again, a relatively small country where hundreds of years of history have created a life sciences research community that really is internationally leading. I think the research we've done at ABPI has shown that in the numbers. So in terms of the amount of money that we invest here in the UK, as companies, we spend about $4.2 billion in R&D in the UK. Out of our global R&D, that's a pretty high share, and if you compare that to the size of the market, they have nothing to do with each other. That's because we're here for the science. The science in the UK is something special. The citation rates we see in publications, not only in neuroscience but in a range of areas, are really at the top of the international tables. In neuroscience alone, you've got probably 2% of the really top 1% citation marks of papers. That really is, the super A-list based here in our research centers. I think that's something that has been established over decades. Just as Earlwood has been here for 50 years, that investment has happened over decades. What we're really focused on now is where do we go from here? How do we keep that agenda moving? I think the UK really has a critical moment right now where it's looking at its own future outside the European Union, but still within Europe, and more critically still as part of an international collaboration. I think the country is now putting together an industrial strategy which is helping map out that strategy for the next 10, 20, 30 years. But looking further, they need to really think about the same basics, which is how do you keep science strong? How do we continue investing in the very institutions that have brought us this far? And what do the new institutions look like? Because the way we do science today and in 10 years or in 50 years is not the same as it was in the past century, for example. So are we thinking enough about the new sort of structures we need for funding, the right sort of structures we need for partnership between industry and academia, and are we thinking about ensuring that collaboration at international levels and the ability for people to move around, because science really runs around in the minds of the scientists themselves. How do we keep that flow moving? For me, that is where the UK needs to think about how it's going to do the science, not just what science it's going to do. We've got a couple of very immediate challenges in the form of Brexit. As an industry, we came together last summer following the referendum to think about our key priorities. We came up with 4, which we thought central to ensuring that life sciences would continue to thrive in the UK. That includes obviously areas around regulation and trade. But 2 key ones really affect science and innovation generally. It's the ability for people to be able to come in and work in the UK and to go from the UK to other parts of the world in the smoothest possible way so that we can really bring in the top talent to work on our projects. But it's also about how we do research. I think sometimes people make the mistake of focusing on funding. Of course, funding matters, but it's how you support science, and a key feature of that is collaborative structures. So how is the UK going to come through the Brexit transition and still retain the partnerships it's developed over decades through the European framework programs, build on those, and extend to new and other areas of partnership? This is an imperative that we've set out for the government. We're always able to show up at a moment's notice for a meeting. I often do, to try and offer them. And actually, companies like Lilly have a tremendous amount to give in terms of the experience and the expertise they have in knowing the best ways to partner, whether that's through the Innovative Medicines Initiative or through Lilly's own direct partnerships here in the UK. I'm another 1967 baby, so I think it's really amazing to see how much has been established at our world, and listening to the neuroscience symposium today really brought home some lessons I've always known about Lilly, really brought to mind today. This is a company that takes on the really tough challenges, and particularly here at Earlwood, I think that's been addressed in the psychiatry work, in the schizophrenia developments, and now in the neurodegenerative disease. I think it really, to me, is a beautiful illustration of why industry matters so much for R&D. I think industry has the stamina, I think it has the persistence, and I think it has the excellence in research to make a difference, and I think Earlwood represents all those.